Maybe it's lavender, Stella. Who knows? Hey, everybody. Mark Britz with the Guild. I'm joined by Stella Lee, and we'll get to her session, as you can see on the screen, in just a few more minutes. I've been away. Karen Gleason has been really kind of holding things down, so bravo, Karen. I appreciate you doing all you've done. I'm happy to step in and give you a breather to kick off week 4. So let's get into a couple things. First and foremost, move my slides here. At the end of the session today, just remember, at the end of the session, just like we have in the last 3 weeks, it's an opportunity to talk to, bring you up on stage. Karen will be back. She's really good at engaging with this in the last 10 minutes and give you an opportunity to kind of showcase any project ideas in the works, any new teams, anything that's currently happening out there within the cohort. Please ping her separately. She'll be here shortly, and she'll pull you up on stage to kind of share and entice the rest of the audience that's with us today. Keep in mind, our living and breathing space for connection and collaboration starts with Slack. So you will see, of course, in Slack, if you visit there frequently enough, you can post in there by using the word team at the beginning to kind of invite other people in. The main section is available to you as well for those general questions and team invites and announcements. I know I was visiting Slack today and saw some people asking about projects. How do I get involved? And I kind of dropped in a note of, hey, it's an opportunity to engage a bunch of other people and just see if you can insert yourself into something that's intriguing and interesting of using xAPI. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. A couple other things regarding Slack, of course. You can kind of browse through here. It's really simple to go to the channels and manage and then kind of look through and find out what those conversations and engage there is. The Slack is pretty robust for all this. So make sure you're leveraging it to its full capability to engage with your peers. And of course, we have the AirMeet platform, which you are in right now, and we create a space for you to have a table. So you can log in with your cohort credentials as noted here. Find the lounge and create a table to meet your peers right here in this space. It's available for just that, to touch base and work on your projects both synchronously and asynchronously. And of course, in November, when everything wraps up, we move on to the party. Okay, so we want to make sure you save the date for the party. November 2nd will be happening from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where you'll get the chance to share your work with the cohort. It's a great opportunity to see what other people have done and accomplished in that process. And keep in mind, it is very much a show your work. We're not looking for completed projects. This is your chance to experiment and try things out with xAPI. It's the best way to learn. A couple things related that you might be very interested. The Guild is supporting in the next couple weeks and months ahead. We have the Learning and Data Analytics online conference taking place September 27th through the 28th. You can register for that 2-day online event, 8 sessions on data and analytics. And of course, DevLearn is right around the corner. That is a program that actually I am producing with my team. And we definitely have the xAPI user conference for you to take advantage of on site and take that deeper dive that's taking place. And of course, we have a host of sessions at DevLearn. You can learn more about data, analytics, and of course, xAPI from the experts. The best way to keep in touch and know what's happening at the Guild is, of course, to become a member of the Guild. It's absolutely free, and you can opt into various communications. So to take advantage of our publications, our events that are happening, our session recordings, and the like, to become a member of the Guild. All right, Stella Lee, you are with us today, which is fabulous. Stella and I, we've known each other a little bit online, back and forth, and we finally had this wonderful conversation a couple weeks ago and really got to know each other. And I want to make a correction here, Stella. If you're looking for Stella afterwards, the company is Paradox Learning. So make sure you note that in here. And I'm sure Stella will tell you a little bit about the work she's doing, but she definitely wants to take this time to dive into data and ethics and L&D. So Stella, I'm going to turn things over to you and step out of the way so you can maximize your time. And everybody remember at the end, we kind of re-engage a little bit and come back together. So there'll be that for the project ideas at the very end. So I'm going to pull my slides down, Stella. And you can bring yours up.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I would just give me a second.
No worries.
Okay, can you guys see the screen?
I can see it. It's up.
Great.
You are good. Okay.
I'm good to go, right? Okay, great. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are today. And thank you for joining on data ethics. Oh, wait, now it's
I'm back.
it's not turning up.
I see your slide. Your main slide's there, Stella.
Oh, because I'm not seeing it.
Oh no, that's not good. No, it's appearing. It's appearing for me. Hey, everybody in the chat, real quick. Are you seeing the first slide, the title slide? Just drop us a note.
Oh, so let me see. That's weird because I am not seeing my own presentation.
Well, that can be awkward.
Choose the application or tab option while sharing the screen to see your presented content. Okay. Is it because I'm in low definition? Is that why it's not showing?
I don't know. Drop over to high definition. Let's see what takes place. I haven't seen that be an issue in the past.
No, it doesn't seem to be.
Thank you, Gabriel and Jeff. Thanks. I'm glad you guys see it.
No, it just say. Let me stop that and try again. Oh, the same thing happened to me a couple of days ago. Monique was saying.
Of course.
That. Okay, let's try this again. It's showing now. So
okay,
I have to make sure I talk fast enough so the slides are showing for me. So thanks again for having me, and thanks for coming to the session on data ethics. It's a very timely topic, and we are definitely going to dive into the intricacy of data ethics, and specifically in L&D, and how to navigate the challenges, and also how do we promote ethical practices in our workplace. I know this is an xAPI cohort, but ethics is a very broad topic. So I want a conversation to go higher past just xAPI to look at data ethics in general in our learning design practices. So if that's good with you, let's get started. I'm still seeing my slides, so just hopefully if you guys have any problem seeing the slides, please let me know. To get started, I want you guys, oh, by the way, feel free to like interject, put your comment in the chat. I love to see comments. So I might not able to answer all the questions during the presentation, but definitely there'll be time in the Q&A session. Please, let's get started on, let's have a definition here. Like what do you guys think of when you hear the word ethics? Like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Please like type in your thoughts and ideas in the chat. I just wanted to see where everybody's at. Okay, good versus bad. Yeah. Fairness and honesty, right versus wrong. Yeah. Informed consent. Okay. Responsible behavior. Oh, these are really great. What guys went to the moral route. So it's all of that. It's in a context, like, so basically it's what you talk about, the morally, legally, and socially acceptable, right, practices. In the context of data, it translates into the principle guiding how we collect, interpret, and utilize information. I actually was inspired by a good friend of mine, Dr. Stephanie Moore at University of New Mexico. If you don't know her work, she had written books on ethics of educational technologies, and I encourage you to look into her work. And she mentioned that ethics is an ongoing reflection and conversation that articulate and explore various, sometimes conflicting perspectives. So I think the key takeaway here is it's not a static thing. It's an ongoing, deliberate practice. So if anything else that you'd forget about this presentation, please keep that definition in mind. I love that. Although Jeff Hassan say all those and a scene from the Billy Madison movie. That's a funny reference. Okay, Now, in terms of data ethics, I really like to consider from the entire data journey and not just from when we're collecting the data or when we are disseminating the data, but from the beginning, when you're creating, when you're curating, when you're sourcing data, to how are you going to process it, and how are you going to interpret, analyze, communicate, and disseminate. So it's throughout this entire process that ethics need to be factored into your consideration. Okay. So having said that, why should you care about data ethics? Like, why are we here? So first of all, I think when we design and implement and evaluate learning, there are implications. There are more implications. There are consequences based on the decisions and the choices we make. Okay, and e-learning in particular, it's heavily relying on data. And this data helps us to track learner progress. It helps us to personalize content. It helps us to perhaps get some insights on how people learn. And with xAPI, it's really robust. You can track and you can capture and store all kinds of data, right? But then it also raises even more questions on ethical considerations. So I think it's really good for us to pause and think and reflect on some of the issues that we need to consider. And also on the flip side of that, if we don't think about data ethics, it's problematic because we might be getting an incomplete picture of our learners and the learning experience. And there are unintentional consequences. We might be making decisions that are skewed based on the limited data that we have, or based on biased data that we have, and it might cause, unintentional harms. So that's why we should care. But more importantly, why should we care now? What's different this year? What's different recently? So I wanted to kind of emphasize things are changing so quickly in this space. What's different now is that data is becoming a really big business. The buying and selling of data alone is a 12 billion USD business, and it's legal in the US. And the volume of data we're getting now with, every organization have LMS data, every organization has perhaps content library, Slack. There's so many tools that are producing data that we never had to deal with before, right? And as you know, this year with all the generative AI tools and all the previous AI tools that are existing is making it even more challenging because there's no transparency in the data sources, and there's no transparency in how the data is being interpreted and how decisions are being made. So it is even more relevant and important for us to think about data ethics now. So having understand the urgency of understanding data ethics, what are some of the challenges? And again, feel free to type your thoughts and comments in the chat. We have limited time to talk about challenges. These by no means are the only challenges we have. And if you disagree or you wanted to add more, please add to the chat. First and foremost, this is with everywhere. When you deal with data, there's also privacy and consent issue. With xAPI, the challenge is that we track so many things. We are collecting a wide range of activities, right? From reading an article to attending a workshop to watching a YouTube video. It's great that we can track all these things, but at the same time, it's potentially revealing sensitive information or personal information that people might not want to track, or they don't understand, why you're tracking them. And also there's certain things might be sensitive, like what if I'm not so good at learning certain things? do I want people to know? Like, is it exposing a weakness in my in me? So yeah, and therefore getting learner consent is so important. And it's not just getting consent, but also giving people a chance to opt out, perhaps, if you can. Like, not everybody wanted to agree, but also understand why are you collecting this data? Like what to what purpose, so people can make an informed decision whether they consent or not consent. So one example I wanted to highlight is, have you guys heard about this Microsoft productivity tool called 365? Like, yeah, again, feel free to type in the chat if you heard of it. So the problem is it actually look at, oh yeah, people thumbs up. Okay, you guys heard of it. So it's basically tracking a variety of activities you've done in 365, and like, if you send emails, how long did you spend time composing an email? Whether you post in Teams, what kind of conversation, like how long are the conversations? It's, in some ways, it's great, giving you like all kind of tracking to understand like where you spend your time. But at the same time, these information are being shared with your manager with your name on it. So it becomes a workplace surveillance tool. So so people are pushed back to say, like, we don't want our name to be attached. And also, when Microsoft gives you this, so it gives you a productivity score to say you're perhaps this week 65% productive, but it didn't tell you, well, how did they define productivity? Is it because you send like, I don't know, 80 emails this week? Is it because your emails are over 500 words each email? Like, how did you make that connection of what deem productive for each person based on whatever you're doing? I could be working outside of 365 and can be seen as unproductive. Exactly. So it's very constraining. Luckily, there's a huge pushback on this tool, and they essentially stop identifying personal information and stop naming names of the person. It just provides like an aggregate data now for the analytics. So you can see, like in the original tool, it actually highlights the person and what they've done, and your supervisors or your manager can see that. So it has consequences in your performance evaluation and review. So that's a no-no. So then the second big question is, who owns the data and how do they share it? So data ownership and sharing is still not really well defined in a lot of organizations, and there's no policies, or the policies are not clear, especially when you're collecting data across multiple parties. Perhaps the content providers are collecting it, your LMS vendors are collecting it, your organization are collecting it, like then who subsequently own the data, and do people know who own the data? And also, your xAPI data is being shared with third parties. There's also potential risk of being misused, and as well as how long are you going to retain that data, and are you deleting it after 3 years? Are you archiving it? So there's all kind of issues connecting to data ownership and sharing. Yeah, and so that's another big topic of discussion. And the third point I want to make is that when you're focusing on collecting xAPI data, sometimes we become over-reliant on the quantitative data aspect. And we need to keep in mind that not all learning activities can be quantified. And there's also a risk of not looking at learning as a holistic experience. An example, and very interesting example I want to share with you. Have you guys heard of this initiative in China, whereby a biometric company created these headbands for students to measure if they, yeah, so some thumbs up there. So some of you might have heard of it. They created headbands to measure what they deem engagement data, to say, seems it used in marketing study. Yeah, and I've seen football play using. So yeah, so it's basically tracking your biometric data, your facial expressions, your eye tracking movement, how you look at the screen, especially when students are interacting with computers. If they if they are bored or if they're paying full attention. But I would argue that it's engagement and the form of whether students are paying attention or they bored. Is it really a valid measure? Like, is this even related to learning? Like, does it matter if people are paying attention or not? Should the deeper question be perhaps the content is not well designed? Perhaps learners are disengaged because they got stuck at certain things and there's no feedback given to them, right? So sometimes we tend to quantify learning without understanding, okay, maybe we need to look at it in a more holistic way. What about talking to the learners? What about looking at how the instructors facilitate a conversation, looking at perhaps the quality of the feedback they're getting instead of just measuring from a quantitative perspective. So it's a really big point, and it's a conversation in the education world that we constantly talk about. But I just wanted to share that with you because sometimes we also confused certain metrics and say, oh, if they are paying attention, that means it's good learning. So there's a deeper issue at play here. Yeah, ethics and culture comes into play. That absolutely, Eric. So then finally, another pretty big point I wanted to make is if you are not careful about how you source and how you apply your data analytics, it could lead to bias and discrimination. As you know, all data sets are biased. The fact that you chose to look at one set of data over another, it's already a value judgment on what you deem it's useful, right? So be very mindful of that, but also it's particularly problematic when you're using your xAPI data to make decisions about perhaps the learner when it links to their work performance. Like, would you make decision because they look at this video 20 times and they spend a lot of time watching these videos and also spend a lot of time looking at this other content? Does the time duration mean, are you making assumptions that more time spent on these systems means good? It's a good thing. Are there any biases in the data to lead to any kind of discriminatory decisions? So that's another area to consider. Okay, so then I wanted to go, get into, there's so many problems, like we don't want to feel helpless. Is there something we can do about it? Oh, somebody said, in my organization, sometimes people leave tabs open and it tracks it is time spent on that. Yeah, like, I know people that deliberately leave systems open, so then it tracks them in the system for a much longer time than it actually is. So that is a problem. So I wanted to talk a little bit more like proactively. What can we do, right, to make sure that we are not falling into these cracks. So the first step I would suggest is start asking questions. Really to understand, like, what are your goals in terms of your data collection and interpretation? Like, are you collecting things because they're low-hanging fruit, they're easy to collect, like how many people attended this session, how many people register for this session, how many people, how many chat conversation are happening here? What are the goals? Like, are these linked to any kind of meaningful learning impact? Are you measuring this just for the sake of measuring, or are you measuring because the data is available, or are you measuring this to actually help you understand and support your learners? And we talk about data ownership, we talk about learner consent, so definitely that's one of the top questions to ask. Are the data representational in what we're trying to do? So also think about, like, if you're collecting all the xAPI data and if only perhaps 50% of your organization people are doing that type of activities, are you leaving out other people doing other activities that data is on? Are you biased toward people that are digitally inclined, and then people like reading a book and reading articles, paper-based? Are we excluding those kind of data? What important metrics are missing? We talk about qualitative data versus quantitative, so be mindful of making sure that your data collection it's holistic and complete. And also, what assumptions are we making about learners? Like, are we assuming that more time spent it's a good thing? Are we assuming that not being bored means engaged? So are we assuming, just because they watched a bunch of videos and completed these courses and read this article, that means they can operate a forklift? Are we looking at performance data as well? So start with asking questions. And then, of course, as a learning professional, we also wanted to make sure that we learn about data ethics literacy. People are just confirming that they're spending weeks in the same module with LMS. It's a very common problem. So I think we can all learn a little bit more about data literacy, data ethics literacy. Understand what questions to ask, understand what are some key topics, understand what data ethics is, how broad of a field it is for us to explore. And so, for example, this is a university in Canada. They talk about what constitutes personal information, and what would be a better practice when you're on Zoom or any kind of webinar tool. Like, do you record the information and share it publicly? So, like, there are many resources, and which I also included some in my presentation at the end on how and where you can learn about data ethics. But start with educating yourself, right? And start looking intentionally for these resources out there, and make sure that you understand like the definition, what are personal information, what ethical practice is, what does it mean by bias and discrimination, what does it mean by representational data. So start with understanding this field a little bit, and then of course the next step is, as we talk about data ownership and all that, it's not clear because we don't have guidelines, we don't have policies, we don't have any accountability in place. So the second step is be an advocate for your learners in your organization. Find out if you have any policies or any governance in data ethics in your organization, and if you don't have it, perhaps you can start creating something, start putting a committee together, start advocating for that. A good source I suggest is Statistics Canada has 6 guiding principles on data ethics. This is not pertaining to learning specifically. It's more on just general practices, but I think the principles apply to what we do in L&D. I think it applies in general. So I encourage you to look at that. Again, I put the source in there. There are other data ethics governance and principles on the web. I encourage you to, and also if you have any in your organization that you wanted to share, feel free to share it within this group, put it in the chat, put it in Slack. I find it often better when I'm building policies to get my peer to brainstorm and give me some insights and input on that. So if you guys are building any policies, if you already have some good policies and principles, please share with us. Okay, so then finally, I also wanted to share what a framework called Privacy by Design that I think would be applicable in our case. This was originally created for engineering, in the engineering domain. but it has since been adopted by other disciplines and industries. Basically, it's a framework to say the protection for the privacy of individuals needs to be the forefront. Like it needs to be at the beginning of any process that you design, and not as an afterthought, and not in the middle of it, but it should be the first thing you consider as you're creating whatever process and projects that you're doing. Again, I put a link at the end, so then if you're interested and curious about that, have a look and see what you're thinking, and see if that's any useful for what you're doing in your organization. Even still, I would want to know, give consent to be observed. Yeah, I agree. 100%. So here are, without overwhelming you guys, I put a few resources. Feel free to connect with me. I have a whack more resources than this, but just to get you started, I think these are good lists of links and resources to learn a little bit more about data ethics and dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we talk about. So I want to conclude by saying that as learning professionals, we really need to take an active role in understanding and also in advocating for data ethics, especially in the digital learning space, right? So I would encourage each of you to start exploring, asking questions, and look at what you're doing with your organization with a more critical lens, and see if any of the ethical practices, are you following them? Where you guys at, maybe do like a little bit of an assessment and see where you guys are at with your respective organization. Yeah, and I would also provide more additional resources too if you guys are interested in learning a bit more. Finally, I really wanted to give more time for conversations and comments and thoughts. I know this is a very active group. I know you guys are all representing different organizations. And so I would love to hear, have you seen anything? What are additional challenges? What are some good practices you are doing? What are you struggling with? What other questions you have about data ethics? So yeah, I would open the floor to everybody. And finally, please connect with me. I love to continue the conversation. I love to learn from you guys. So thank you for paying attention.
Okay, that was fabulous, Stella. I appreciate the resources too.
Yeah.
So I denoted. I'm looking at the questions and seeing if people have questions coming in. I see Tammy. I'm going to jump on this one first. She's asking in chat. I don't know if you see that, Stella.
I'm trying to catch up with the chat, but you guys are very active.
Yeah. She was asking if it's familiar. Are you familiar with it's moving xAPI as it relates to data transparency?
Oh, wait, sorry. What is it?
Tammy Parks. She asked the question about relating to data transparency.
Oh, maybe like, are they allowed to speak on the speaker? I mean, feel free to speak out.
Oh yeah, yeah. If anybody likes to, anybody would like to, real quick, I can pop you up on stage with us.
Yeah, Tammy Parks, she just put experience AI. So.
Oh, experience AI.
This subject is even trickier when using xAPI for customer training scenarios. Yeah, like none of these have easy answers. Okay. So yeah, please, if people can like just type the questions again, maybe in the chat, or just grab the mic and speak.
Yeah, we have to. I would have to like enable them to speak.
Oh, okay.
So if anybody's interested in that, just let me know in the chat, and we can make that happen. Otherwise,
I would try to read the conversation backward too.
Yeah.
Not really have much to learn. Yeah, we all do, Mark. It's is an ever-evolving space, especially with AI this year. There's still even more questions raised on data ethics. Okay, I'm going to read some of the conversation backward, okay?
Yep.
And while Stella is doing that, if there's anyone who wants to join us in the cohort check-in, I know I've got a couple people lined up, but just message me. I'm Karen Gleason. Let me know you want to talk about your project or what your team is working on, or just about your team, or even, tell people, I've got a team, come join me.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Harley's message. She said, when I observe, I also get learner consent under the rationale that I'm a researcher using that data to make informed design decision in my training programs. That's a great way to explain your why, like explain what your end goals are. I think people are not going to be like, they're more open to that, right? To the data being collected, if that the ultimate goal is actually how improve my learning experience. The ultimate goal is to make the training better. And I think we don't communicate that enough when we're collecting data, or we just collect it silently without like thinking we can just sneak by, right? And I think that's a very nice approach to that. So thanks, Harley.
I'm scanning to see if I missed anything, Stella. I don't see any other questions popping just yet. Again, if anybody wants to jump on stage to engage with Stella or ask a question, might be easier to speak it than to type it. We could do that. I don't know if you see it, Stella. Veronica. Do you see Veronica's?
Yeah, wondering if you have any insights into what's the most important things to capture when it comes to learning data. Oh boy, that's the $1 million question. So my response is, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like the most important is in relation to what you want to get out of the training, what you want people to get out of the learning activities. Like, is the most important thing to capture is that people merely show up to a session. If that's the most important thing for you and your organization, then yeah, just counting number of seats, it's the most important data, right? But that's what I put, like, what important metrics have you identified those, and have you leave them out? And if your goal is to say, well, we push this learning out with the ultimate goal on how to drive a forklift, with the ultimate goal that people can actually operate a forklift, then your metrics is really about, can people operate safely on a forklift? And that becomes the most important metrics to collect. Or if you are doing sales training and you want people to make sure that there's a increase in sales, then you wanted to make sure the data collected would lead to you measuring, is there an increase in sales, with the understanding, with the caveat that there might be other factors influencing that number, right? But you still have to say, that's what I care about at the end. So we need to figure out everything we can to measure that. So yeah, my answer is, it depends on what's the most important thing for you to measure. Yeah, so I could see people measuring all kind of other things in effort to paint a picture, so to speak. Yeah, they call proxy data. So learning is so difficult to measure, right? It's not like yes or no. It's not like I've seen it or I don't see it. So a lot of times in learning, we end up collecting what we call proxy data to say, is this an indication of learning actually take place? But then meanwhile, there's a lot of really bad proxy data just because we can get them easily. I have to say, honestly, like LMS and other e-learning companies are not helping, because they are the one perpetuating and saying, we have this, we can measure that. And therefore people just think that's all we can measure, because their machines are basically spitting out those proxy data for you. So I would also advocate that when you're engaging with learning vendors, be very critical and be very analytical in asking them questions. Well, yes, you can collect this data, but do we need that as an organization? Does it answer the questions we want answers for about our learners, about their learning programs? So don't let the vendors drive those metrics and those data for you. You as an L&D professional, learning. So we need to drive that. So that's my take on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I know there's a couple more questions there, and we're hit our checkpoint check-in here for the cohort. And I'm going to invite one of our people here onto stage who's going to talk to us about their particular project. So let me invite Dan to the stage, Dan Stryzak, I believe. And Dan's going to talk to us about what he has been talking about in Slack. And I did private message some other people. And Dan, have you joined us? I don't see you.
Should be coming
There
up.
we are. There you are. Wonderful.
Hi.
So you can use your camera and mic if you'd like.
Yes.
And
Cool.
so Dan, tell us what you're working on and what you'd like to work on.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Dan Stryzak. I am part of the Slack group focused on gamification and design and using xAPI as part of that. So far, there hasn't been too much discussion on which way we want to go with it, but there was, I brought up doing an escape room. I'm currently working on an escape room for a company training that I'm developing. And so that's kind of what came to mind. I feel like it can be used really well for either like technical skill training, which is what I'm using it for, or professional skill training. So we're trying to decide where we want to go with it. But the idea would be to use something like Articulate Storylines 360 image, and then having that link out to different slides where they can pursue interactions and change variables so we can get like a summative of what they did. Yeah, so if anyone would be interested in joining that or learning more about incorporating xAPI into the escape room, definitely, let us know. Join the gamification and design group in the Slack.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
did message a couple other people who had put some interesting things in there. But what I want to remind you to do is that if you have created a team, to drop the description in that hashtag main so that people can join you. And there's a couple other things. I don't see anyone who's taken me up on Martin. So Martin, I'm going to go ahead, and Martin will be talking to us about CMI 5 in just 1 second, as soon as I can get Martin here. And for those of you who don't know about CMI 5, Martin will tell us about it a little bit. So Martin, I've invited you to the stage. So he'll be coming with us just a little bit of time, I'm sure. There he is. And go ahead, Martin.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Sorry, turning everything on. Okay. Yeah, so if you're not aware, CMI 5 is sort of the successor to SCORM. So it has more capabilities. It's able to launch your program LMS. It communicates an LRS API statements. And so the idea that I floated is just seeing what is different authoring programs can produce. So there's one person who said that they've got an idea for a project they want to do, and I'll put it at CMI 5. So we'll meet in the lounge right after this. So if anyone else is interested in that, they have whatever their authoring tool of choice, and if it does export to CMI 5, we can produce it. And then also there's a testing thing called Catapult Content Test Suite. So we could, as an activity, sort of produce different examples and then run them up against that and see and learn how to do that, but also see what kind of results we get. So that's sort of the idea. We'll discuss
right.
that, whether that's the thing or not. So.
Well, that's great. And so you just mentioned everyone can go out to the lounge and join the tables.
Yeah.
So that really comes to the end of our presentation for today. We want to thank Stella Lee for her wonderful presentation. That was thank you so much, Stella. Thanks, and connect with her.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And then just as we close out, if you once you leave and we end the session, you'll be put out into the reception area. Feel free to go to the lounge, join a table, name your table, meet with your teammates, and get some things going here at the cohort for the fall. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.